You're on mute, Councillor Bolton.
Right, we're all there. Obviously, if I could get both Donna and Karen to put on, Karen's pictures on, but
Kieran.
Donna, if you can.
It's Kieran.
Kieran. Okay. Donna, could you, Councillor Clark, put on your camera? Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah, you've got to leave it on throughout.
Mark, given this is you don't need to read anything further, given this is a continuation of the meeting. No, you're content. Excellent. Okay. Right. Welcome to those in attendance at this remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council. My name is Councillor Mary Bolton and I'll be chairing the meeting today. Councillors Donald Clark and Kieran van Sweden are also in attendance and will be participating. This meeting has been reconvened following the decision of the LRB on the 17th of August 2022 to undertake a site visit, which was held earlier today and was in the response to a request for a review of this decision taken by the appointed officer under the Council scheme of delegation. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. You'll also be reminded to note that we may have members of the public or press observing today's proceedings. And as I said, if I could ask those who are not in the meeting formally, if you could keep your cameras and microphones switched off throughout. Can all members of the review body, however, leave their cameras on but mute their microphones when not speaking? As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the room or meeting during consideration of the review. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. I will now ask Mr. Masson, is there anything further you wish to add? Because you've already outlined the procedure that we'll already conduct this review under.
I think it's probably best that I just read out what I had before, given that we've got one new councillor today, as opposed to what we had at the last meeting, if that's okay with yourself.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Mr. Masson, absolutely.
Okay, so members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. From this, it is clear that the first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. To assist, I feel it would be helpful to mention the following. Firstly, that the regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. Secondly, that the focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. Thirdly, to note that the modernisation of the planning system, which included revisal of the planning appeals process, of which this local review body is part, removed the previous right on the part of an applicant to insist on a hearing and replaced that with a local review body, providing them with the power to choose a procedure which more accurately reflects the facts and circumstances of the individual case. And lastly, that guidance issued by the Scottish Government's Chief Planner in 2011 stated that reviews of local review bodies should be conducted by means of full consideration of the application afresh. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the Chair to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Masson. Right, turning to consideration of the review in respect of a decision to refuse the application for the erection of the first floor extension to Curlerley Cottage, 8 Charles Place, Aberdeen, AB 25-3TW, planning reference 220267/DPP. We'll now hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would point out that Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the earlier consideration of the application under review. Ms Green will, however, not be asked to express any views on the merits of the proposed development, and in fact, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. So with that said, I'll just pass over to Ms Green.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, councillors. I'll just share my screen.
It's there. Thanks, Lucy.
So this relates to the request for review against an application refused under delegated powers for the erection of a first floor extension to form a double-storey house at Kirkcallie Cottage, which is accessed off Charles Place, Aberdeen. The review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. And we, as the convener stated, we attended a site visit this morning. The applicant has indicated on the notice of review that there are no new matters which have been raised in the review submissions. It was noted that there are shadow cast images provided in Appendix 9 to the review statement. And having had a full opportunity to consider these, we noted that there is mention of daylight simulation on the drawings that were submitted with the application, along with the drawing that showed the 25 and 45 degree lines. So therefore this information in Appendix 9 is considered to be expanding on that drawing. And the shadow cast information relates to the impact on 9 Charles Street. And I can show you that more further on in the presentation if you wish. In terms of the procedure by which the review will be conducted, we have undertaken a site visit. I'll provide some background information to the case before handing back for members to decide whether they're happy that they have enough information to proceed.
Okay, members, we obviously took, as we heard from Ms Green, a site visit this morning. Are you content that you have the sufficient information now to go ahead with the consideration?
Yes, convener.
Yeah.
Yes, convener.
Okay, back to yourself, Ms Green.
Okay, I'll proceed with describing the site. The application site is a single-storey granite house, together with its front and rear curtilage, and it's within a dense, largely residential area, bounded by Charles Place, which is a pedestrian lane from which it's accessed. There are other residential dwellings at 5 and 7 Charles Street, which we saw this morning. That's the 2-storey flats there. Also at 9 to 11, an HMO, and here on George Street, an HMO. And then there's the PDSA to the rear of the site, which we also saw. And that's a pet hospital, which includes a staff flat on the upper floor to the north, and then the house has its principal elevation to the front to the northeast. So this is just showing, as we saw this morning, the site within its context. And that's a 3D view, just looking there at the front curtilage, just in here. And that's looking from Charles Street towards the house. So you can just see the wall of it there, as you saw on site this morning. And that's just showing the roof, hipped roof. Planning permission is sought for the erection of an upper storey extension above the original dwelling, with the roof having been removed, so that it would become 2 storeys in form with the hipped roof. Well, these are just showing the floor plans as existing and as proposed. So the two top ones as existing and then as proposed, showing 3 bedrooms on the upper floor. And these are the elevations. So this is into the front garden. And you can see the side of the PDSA flat there. And that's just looking in from Charles Street, so you can see the end, gable end there. From the other side, the rear garden, which faces the back of George Street. And then the elevations as existing. So the extension would rise above the wall head by just under 4 meters, and it would have a maximum ridge height of just under 7 meters, with a resulting eaves height of around 5.2 meters. It will be 13 meters in width and 7.8 in length. So the upper level would be stepped in from the existing ground floor wall by about 200 mil. The walls of the extension would be finished in timber cladding with dry dash render to the end elevation and also reclaimed granite on the corners and ends of the front and rear elevations. Windows and fascia would be in grey UPVC and the roof would be finished in a grey standing seam metal cladding. And this shows sections through the building. So the top showing the existing roof, which would be taken off and then the extension put on. So that's looking towards the PDSA building just there. And this section, same thing, but looking towards Charles Street. And this drawing shows the applying of the 45-degree rule to assess the impact on the neighbouring window on Charles Street. So that's that one. And then the 25-degree rule is referred to in terms of the PDSA window. Take the 25 degrees up from the horizontal from the midpoint of the window. And if that's obstructed, it sort of fails that test. But you can see that it's just on that point there. And I can also show the shadow cast information if members wish.
Yeah, that'd be helpful on screen just to give us a complete picture. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'll just move. Right, let's see if I can enlarge that. Oops, it's got too big.
That's fine.
Right, just running through these. The drawing that we were looking at just a moment ago notes that these are taken in June. So that just one time of year these represent. So the first lot show the shadow cast without the appeal site building, showing the impact of other buildings in the area. So at 12 noon and 6 p.m. And then this is the existing shadow cast without the upper story added of the appeal building. And then this is with the proposed story added, but without the shadows cast from the neighbouring building on Charles Street. So it just shows change there of adding the upper story. And then this is including all of the buildings, the impact of all of them with the upper story added. That's the end. Right, so I'll just go back to the presentation.
Thank you.
So the reasons for refusal, which are stated fully in the report of handling in the agenda, can be summarised as follows. The design detailing and materials would lack architectural compatibility with the original building. The excessive scale and form would dominate the original building, that the upper story would affect privacy, sunlight and daylight of neighbours and would be overbearing, in particular the privacy of flats at 506 George Street and sunlight, daylight and outlook for the staff flat at the PDSA. As further stated, it would be contrary to policy H2, which is mixed use, and D1, which is design, in the adopted plan, and also contrary to the householder supplementary guidance. Furthermore, that it would be contrary to similar policies H2, D1 and D2, which relates to amenity in the proposed plan. For the applicant's case, it stated that the impact on the neighbour at the PDSA to the north has been resolved with the 3/4 story proposal, the hipped roof and also the setback of the upper story from the existing building. The drawing that we've just seen demonstrates compliance with the 25 and 45-degree rules, that any development of this nature in a city centre would lead to reduction in amenity, but the proposals don't have a significant detrimental impact. That the additional story would inevitably add height and mass. That they looked at an alternative, which would be to add dormers, but that didn't work in design terms. That materials are existing stonework, which has been reclaimed from the chimney, vertical larch cladding, grey dry dash to the end elevations and a metal standing seam. And all of those are materials that are used extensively within the city. And there are various examples given of that. So it's further pointed out that there are a variety of building styles and materials in the area, and included in the examples is 90 Lock Street, which is nearby. So in terms of consultations, there were no comments from the George Street Community Council, which appears from their website to be active. And there are no objections from the Roads Development Management team and no representations received. So I continue on to the policies. The site lies within an area zoned under policy H2 mixed use. And the most relevant part of that is that where new housing is proposed, a satisfactory residential environment should be created, which should not impinge upon the viability or operation of existing businesses. And then it also considers the amenity of people living and working in the area. Policy H1 residential areas is also relevant as this is residential development, and in particular the criteria 4 complies with supplementary guidance, and that's the householder development guide in this case. So included in the general principles is that proposals should be architecturally compatible in design and scale with the original house and also the surrounding area. Materials should be complementary to the original building, and extensions shouldn't overwhelm or dominate the original form. Then the second criteria relates to situations where there's an impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties, and in particular it highlights privacy, daylight and general amenity. So there's no specific guidance on adding a story to a single story property. It just highlights that 2-story extensions may be acceptable. This was just included to describe for members how the 25-degree and 45-degree method work. I can explain that. I won't go through all that, but I can, if there are any questions, I can cover that. design policy D1 with the criteria that development must ensure high standards of design with a appraisal of context, high quality architecture and materials. And finally, in terms of evaluation, the primacy of the development plan, where applications are determined in accordance with the plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and that each application should be treated on its merits. So the basis for the decision, how would the proposal affect the character of the building and the area? And in terms of the relevant supplementary guidance, what is the impact on amenity of the occupiers of neighbouring buildings, the staff flat and the flats on George Street in particular? So I'll finish there and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Green.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark, have you any questions for Ms. Green?
No, I've got no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Van Sweden, any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Members, obviously, in accordance with the procedure notes circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. Perhaps I'll kick off. We obviously went to the site visit today, and the area, I'm sure, will be reasonably well known to all of you, or both of you, should I say. George Street, it is a heavy residential and retail area with some other mixed business uses, with a variety of road styles around it and lanes, as we've seen today when we found Charles Place. We've obviously heard from officers about the different policies that are related. Now, some of these are obviously subjective and it's down to your personal interpretation of some of them. And we've had arguments, obviously, from the applicant in terms of where they have, in their view, demonstrated that it does comply with various supplementary guidance, which has been suggested it doesn't. And we saw that particularly, I think, with the daylight elements. I think if I was to, determine where I would sit with this, is I would actually be looking to overturn the officer's recommendation and approve this application. I feel there's a mixed style of buildings in this area with a mixed use. It is in a residential area and is currently a residential dwelling. Houses need to adapt and be adapted to be fit for 21st living. Each one, which we heard about, the supplementary householder designer guide, which was some of the things that the comments, and that was around things like the 25 methodology in terms of daylight. I'm content that it's been demonstrated by the applicant that they do comply with that. The other one, D1, is again, that's about design, distinctive place, welcoming place, and I think that actually I think it's actually quite a nice location, and I think that the addition of more living space for a family home is being designed, I think, in a sensitive way. There's no one style in that area. So, and I think probably if we go back to the long ago, there was an awful lot of timber clad buildings in Aberdeen. And I think it's something that's definitely come back, and we have had examples in the area identified, and I have had a little drive round, and there's all sorts of finishes to some of these buildings. There's no conflict with T2 or T3. R6, there's no conflict. D2, amenity. I think the fact that we haven't had any objections from any of the residents nearby, adjacent to, demonstrates that they haven't got concern about amenity. And in fact, if you look at where the property is, probably they have the greatest impact on amenity with the buildings around them. And I don't believe that this would be detrimental to any of them. And I think they've gone out of their way to actually make a difference by changing the design of the roof. the PDSA flat is not permanently occupied, and they haven't objected to the application. And as I said, I think they've demonstrated, I think it was on, I'm just looking at, put some notes down here, where they have adjusted the roof style to be able, I think that was on page 58, because of course we changed the numbers on the pages from when I first had the report, to show that they have taken that into consideration. The only thing that I might have considered doing was one of the rear windows, because there's two rear windows on the applicant's plans, a bedroom and a bathroom, is perhaps if we could have put some sort of opaque glass condition that, which would give privacy both to the applicant, I believe, and anybody. There's no direct window to window. So, you know, in my view, I think that taking it in the round, having reviewed all the different policies, and the fact that there is no objection from the Community Council, there's no objection from any nearby, or anybody in fact, I think on balance I would overturn the officer's recommendation and move for approval. Councillor Clark.
Yes, I have to agree there. I've looked at all the aspects, and with the agreement now with the PDSA, and they seem happy with the changes. Nobody else has come forward, and you would think in such a small area that they would have come forward. I think it's been quite well advertised about the planning, and I did take up your point on the bathroom glass. I would like to see that that is done. Other than that, no, there's no other issues. I take on board the 25% and 45% ruling. There is not one design in that whole area. I mean, it would be different if we were talking about the whole street had to be the same. They're all totally different. They're all facing different angles. So I'm more than happy to overturn the decision. I'll be led by yourselves.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Van Sweden.
Okay, convener, so I would be inclined to refuse this application. So my reasons are as follows. So policy H1 does not constitute overdevelopment. I feel that this does constitute overdevelopment. Policy H2, mixed use areas. So a satisfactory residential environment should be created. I think there are issues with both privacy and light to the other buildings. Amenity can be affected by the residential development, which again refers to the privacy and light. But my particular concern is D1, the quality placemaking by design, so that places must be safe and pleasant. But it's the safety aspect that really concerns me, convener. My big concern with safety is that this is not accessible to the fire services. And you know that's a very big concern for me. Lastly, D5, yes, I feel that it's not compatible with our granite heritage. That's my thinking.
All right, thanks very much. Okay, well, we've obviously got a divided vote, which is Councillor Clark and myself to overturn the officer's recommendation, and Councillor Van Sweden who wishes to uphold it. So the majority carries, which will be to approve this application. Ms. Green, is there any conditions that you feel in terms of just the standard ones that might be required to be attached?
I don't think there's any of the standard ones. I would just ask for confirmation on which windows. Would it be the bathroom window?
It was just the
bathroom window,
bathroom.
opaque, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
please.
likewise with me, it's the bath.
Yeah. I know we don't want to lose anybody's dignity. Okay, so thank you very much, members. That is a decision 2-1 to overturn the officer's recommendation with a condition just to have opaque glass in the bathroom. Thank you all very much for your attendance today. Apologies for the delay to the applicant for us coming together, but it was unforeseen circumstances. And that concludes the business for today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.